This is the board today, and before I get into the board though, now that we know that it's set up properly, now you're just gonna get in like my head here. But before we get into the board today, I really wanted to talk about some stuff in regards to etymology and ciphering and the Kabbalah and how the Kabbalah came about. And so we're gonna do a little story reading time again. And just so that you're aware, you know, where the origins of a lot of the modern interpretations of letters and numbers really come from. And also to understand that letters were never connected to numbers in the beginning. This is a major thing that you have to understand, that for the ancient people counting, and it just all depends on which group of ancient people you're referring to. But if you're referring to the indigenous ancient people, of course, their counting was done through sticks, and they still have in many places where they still use a stick counting system. So for them, it was just simply checking off, making the straight line as the indicator of 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can imagine that because numbers is not just a stick, and let's utilize the board here. Because the number, so the indigenous would do this and then sometimes this, like the old school method to count things. And when it came to language and letters and numbers, it was never written down. So then there graduated a system where people were actually just writing the letters, let's say, or writing something as a letter. And then there became entire languages, and of course Arabic was, you know, or the roots of Arabic and Sanskrit, and of course Tamil were the roots to a lot of language systems. But still, those language systems never found themselves attached to numbers, and there's a reason why, until much later. Because, of course, let's say for instance this is an A, okay? It didn't ever become one until way later on, because this language of numbers was introduced way later on. So this is something that you need to really be aware of. I'm going to try to write bigger here. So the language of numbers, this what we call, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, these particular symbols are a language within themselves. So in an instance, we really shouldn't look at these numbers at times as just numbers, for better lack of words. It's actually a language. And for the beings who know how to read that language, or choose to read or learn in that language, sometimes numbers, okay, can be numbing. Meaning that there becomes an extreme level of having no feeling when you start using the language of numbers. And this is how it manifests in society, as everyone's just a number now. They give you a social security number, then you have a driver's license number, and then a tax ID number, and then an EIN number. So you have all these numbers because to the system that's actually reading you, which is really a computer, it speaks numbers. So now, this is, of course, a very deep revelation for everyone. Let's get into, again, how the numbers came about, like the language of numbers came about. And as I said before, Pythagoras was the key figure in pushing forth this new language called numbers. And what he would do is him and the team and the retinue he was with, the cult that he was with, would go into areas and start attaching the people's language to numbers. Like if they found anything written, they would say, okay, now this aleph means 1 and beth means 2. So this is how more or less a race of people put another GUI or a GUI over the top of other people's language so that they could just read their languages like numbers to find out the hidden number. Okay? The unknown quotient, as they call it. People don't ever really think about all this stuff, like how does it happen? And some of the individuals involved, and Crowley and the Queen and all these different individuals, like what are they really up to? Because obviously they're not into a heavy level of producing expansive universes and planetary systems, because they choose not to educate and activate their supposedly children. And so this is why, you know, we have to see how the system has been basically put on a computer type autopilot, where something that knows how to predict how predictable people are going to act is running things. And it also shows you how to guide yourself into an absolutely organic sphere. So here's what you're dealing with. You have Paracelsus, because I remember I said Pythagoras and those guys that were spreading the numbers as a language. You have Paracelsus, you have Cardinal Nicholas Cassius, you have Jacob Boehm, you have other cardinals, Pope Sixtus, you have Rudolph and Cutworth and Sir Isaac Newton. You have Francis Bacon, of course. And, you know, there's a whole list of others. John Dee, who's the original 007. You have many individuals, and I'm even going to show you in the current times how this keeps going, that are now moving throughout the world attempting to make all cultures submit to numbers. Now, remember, the numbers also come in with money very heavy, so you can see that there was more in their bag of tricks than just this language of numbers and how to what later on became known as not just squaring the circle, but triangulating the circle at times and hexing the circle at times. And this is why. Let me make sure. This is why. Some people are familiar with this term squaring the circle, but the square is not the only tool used to corner the circle. And this is why. Now, in an instance, if we were trying to describe the limitless into this reality, we would have to use this symbol. This is a symbol in itself that should never really be used in the physical reality. It should always really be kept high and holy, for a better lack of words. That's why the word holy, right? You could spell it like this. You could spell it like this. The holy, right? You're never supposed to really put the holy, especially the holiest of holies, inside of the dimension, okay? And that's why inside of this dimension is the holiest of holies. And then, of course, this is that phi base thing going on, okay? But actual temple, which later on became known as the Temple of Solomon, was to create these phi base systems inside of an actual building for ultimate charging in the holies of holies, which was known as the Black Cube or the Kaaba, okay? So holy, if you were to mention it here as a symbol, you would have to use this one. So now, of course, with the misunderstanding of this one, people have this idea that when they throw something away, it goes nowhere. Because it goes in a hole and it never comes back again. That's not true. When you throw something away, it goes to the garbage dump. So this is why the limitless should always remain outside of the limited. Just remember that. So now, with the holy, what happens is you have several different organizations that were looking to square, triangulate, or whatever you can really imagine with the circle or with the unlimited spirits, okay? And we have about, I guess, 7 here now, so we can go with it. So if one chooses to utilize the type of knowledge that would divide the circle, meaning make the soul divided, okay? They will use this knowledge. This is the knowledge of how to divide the circle one time. Okay? This is the knowledge of yin and yang. Okay? And then when the circle is then divided twice, it becomes this or this. Okay? Now remember, all of these are belief systems. And the reason why I use this one in the middle is because it's like the Mercedes-Benz sign, right? It's just 3, but that means 3 triangles or 3 suns. As we know, the ones who deal with this system are worshiping 3 suns known as Sol, and An. Okay? Now, the next level of this level of division is then this one. Okay? And everyone's seen that symbol before. And the next level of dividing the circle is this one. Okay? That's 5 sides. The next one is this one. That's 6 sides. The next one is this one. That's 7 sides. Okay? And so you can see where all this is really going, because of course, you know, this is, geez, these days, I guess we'll just call it the R sign. And, you know, you see this is what they call Judaism, okay? And then this, of course, is Elven, okay, for the elf races. The dead races of fallen angels and giants that are still trapped here on the sphere. Of course, this is anything to do with, actually, this is also an indigenous symbol. It's not a Christian symbol. And that's why the Christian symbol became this, okay? It's an unbalanced cross. So don't confuse this unbalanced cross with this cross here, because this cross is also used by the Knights Templar. Many different crosses, of course, as you see, are perfect equilateral crosses. And then, of course, this system remains a lot more hidden because it's an older system, but it is a system of the Trinity. So you also see, when you go back here to the dualistic system of the yin and the yang, which are some of the Taoists, the most ancient teachings, you see also, oh, okay, well, they're unleashing these systems based on the time we're living in. Because the Taoists and the ancient teachings, of course, everyone knows that stuff is old. You be sitting there like, okay, this is the and you ain't even get thwacked. That's the tradition there. You're never supposed to fall asleep in duality. So then the Trinities in those base systems are actually some of the overseers of the world's Christian system. As you see, the Trinity is still running because it's really Russian Orthodox more so than it is anything else. And then so you see the cross, the ones who start coming through bearing the cross, as they say, in this sign ye shall conquer. Also, I want to let you know that this starts to become the same club after a while. This is real Kabbalah. Kabbalah means cable. That's why that word is here. A cable is a circle. Okay? And also the secret behind this symbol is that every letter, every cable or every language must have a first and last letter. So in English, it's A and Z. In as means unbreakable, and strength in ancient knowledge. Okay? So they make sure that they use something that is unbreakable and has a great deal of strength in order to connect this cable. Okay? And this becomes also the symbol again of Ouroboros, where the serpent's eating his tail. So you see then, after the Christians come through, or the Catholics come through, and the knowledge is passed about the four corners of the earth, because remember, this knowledge, which became known later on and became drawn as a symbol by the Cathars, was really resting with the indigenous people, like the ones like the Aztecs and many of those races who were. This wasn't just Druidic symbols. This is when the Druids finally got the knowledge from the Naga of where the gates were in the world. And this became known as North, East, South, and West. And I showed you yesterday on a chart that there, on the pole, the Alpha Draconis is by the pole, but that's another story. We won't get into that right now. So you can see here basically plainly the division of the souls. And these are wheels that are working within the body, and their combustion or confusion and fighting against one another, even though they're supposed to still have the same Father, okay, and then the same God. We find that their God is numerically equivalent to the number 26. Okay, the English language happens to have 26 letters. A face of a cube is 26. So this means that the language that we're using is more based on this system here. If you want to pick bing, 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 that's that kind of system with those kind of numbers. Put into 3D, because you have to now compensate for it's in third dimension, so you have to do the extra numbers. And remember, I'm putting this for people who don't really know numbers. We're not going to really get into all the confusing stuff that they keep cooking up for people with these crazy numbers, right? Like now there's Kabbalah, and I don't even need to read it from there. I'll just tell you, Kabbalah became a toy for the royal family. They became incessantly fascinated with attaching numbers to everything to see if they could figure things out. See, a king would be born and he would want to know right away, cast my future, cast it. And then he would, of course, the nervous magician would be like, okay, I'll cast it. And then he'll come back with nothing but, oh, you're going to reign and you're going to win in this battle. And maybe he would put one or two things so it didn't just sound odd. But most of these soothsayers were under the same incessant poison that everyone else was under in the palace, which is why Buddha left the palace. You see what I mean? So in the palace, there's a certain kind of frequency. And of course, the palace, for those who want to play around with etymology today, of course, that's what we're doing. Palace is the phallus. That's where the word comes from. So it was, again, this same, you see the P here, which, of course, every single little boy goes like a little pee-pee. Every single word that generally has to do with a reproductive tool, it starts with P. Just think about it. So now what you see here is you're starting to get a picture of what's going on in the world and why so many people are confused, because the word Babel, we got a little room down here. The word Babel was the word papal and was related to papal, who also became known as the Papal Vu, which the people had already been writing about. Like their scripts got changed to make everyone think the Papal Vu was who they were serving and worshiping, but really that was the Papal Vu changing that, because the Papal Vu is the papacy, and they control all Latin countries under Solar Invictus with the demon Rex Mundi. We smite his face. So Babel is actually the deity that you're dealing with, by the way. His name is really Ba-El, okay? So once you can start to track Ba, okay, then you'll start finding out more what's going on the dimension. And this is, of course, where the etymology and ciphering is going to be going into today, is how to track people like Ba, Rock. Okay, I can just spell it this way, okay? Who's Barak? What is the Barak? The Barak is the Kaaba. It's the stone. So you see how these individuals go and fight, well, that's supposed to be the navel of the earth. These people go and start fights with their own people, using their own people. That's really the strategy. The strategy for most of these countries is false flag. They go blow up something and blame it on someone else, and then they get the two warring groups, factions fighting against each other, and then they never realize that once they get on their last leg and weak, then that's when the invader will move in, because the invader is not strong enough to fight you undivided. The invader is of division. You see? This is why you have to be whole, or you'll be here forever. It's not a game anymore. Or you can make it a game, like Tron, it games. It loads you up for the game again. Trust me, I run, like if you notice in the Seal of Marduk, you see Marduk, and I wish I could host that picture, maybe I can. You see Marduk with several of these wheels inside of him, indicating that he has run the wheels of time. Here we go. Actually, I have it here. Let's see. Okay, I'll get that source for you here in a moment. Check it out. But many people have seen this image before, some have not. But basically, when they show the entity Marduk, they show that he's been through several cogs of time. And what this is really about is this is about many of the more graduated gods, as they call themselves, have run through all of those religions that I had there earlier for you and have won the gauntlet. Let's see here. All right. And we're going to go ahead and name this picture Marduk, Time Lord. And this is why Earth is constantly revisited by the energies that already have mastered the system, is because they are the system. Like the energy that runs through when you're connected to the wheels of time in full synchronicity, you have access to all subsequential selves and hyperdimensional selves. So thus God becomes omniscient, meaning that the God who's the human, hopefully beyond that, because this is another thing. God is not a male. Let me show you why. God comes from the Hebrew word yod. Okay? Yod means 10. The definition of 10 in Kabbalistic texts, which are the same people who made this word, God, because a G is a Y, is a I, is a J. Okay? So these, you won't see this one much anymore. These are all the same word. So this was meant to be masculine, obviously. All right? And then this one was feminine, obviously. So if the name is God, how does God become a male? This is why I'm telling you, you have to, when you find one lie, you'll start uncovering a lot of lies within this Christianity and all these different religions. You'll find they've been lying since the beginning. It's the lion. Jah. Lying to the kids. Now what it's time for everyone to do here, because they need to understand a lesson. Trust me, when you're walking out of these dimensions, most of these beings will be waving at you. Bye. Because the reality is that they're all here playing a role. And when you stop allowing everything else to make the decisions for you, and then you start making the decision to actually learn and actually emancipate yourself from the matrix, that's when you earn the right and ability to do that. Some water here. Now notice, on the picture I just uploaded, they're fawning over Marduk. You know, they're down there worshiping, bowing down, but he's in the image of man, meaning that he could be nothing more than a graduated man. But even the kings, Nimrod and all the rest of them, are right down there below worshiping. This is the problem. Because remember, as I've been telling you about for the last 3 days, this combustion, this fighting, worship. Everyone loves this one. I cracked it first in the code of the matrix. No, never mind. Worship. Okay? And when you're on the warship, fighting against the dark forces because you're the light forces, forget about it. You're getting used. It happens to a lot. It happened to the best. So also, when you ask yourself, oh, no, surely I'm too smart. Look, it's happened to the best. There's a whole book here. People should get this book. I told you before, Sex, Symbols, Sex, and the Stars. You know, Jordan Maxwell really recommended this book, and he's right. I mean, it lays it out pretty definite. So what you're also dealing with, just so you understand again, like, so the royals became incessantly fascinated with this Kabbalah. And this part of Kabbalah, though, the astrological, tell me what I'm supposed to be in the future part, not necessarily the mathematical, let's see how we can square the circle part, or basically pi. Let me show you how pi connects into all this, by the way, for another major mystery, is, let me see my notes here. Pi is hidden within the mystery of what is known as the Elohim. And we got on the Elohim a little bit yesterday, and I'm glad we didn't, you know, completely expound on it, because there was still, we needed a little bit more time to expound on it, so we have that time today. But the term Elohim is not masculine. It actually is androgynous. Because once you add Ohim, or him to Elohim, it becomes feminine and masculine. Okay? So this is masculine. This is feminine. So Elohim is an androgyne. And this is why, because there's many Elohims going throughout the church, there is a heavy reconversion in the bath, as we were talking about, where the individual it changes sex. And this is the deeper part of what they don't want to talk about in regards to what some of these spirits do. If these spirits happen to be polarized to an opposite angle than the individual. So if they're polarized to the opposite angle of the individual, and that's what allows them to be able to become a fit for that individual, because all of what's happening is basically intercourse, spiritual intercourse, and the person is tanning or bringing in the energy of whatever deity or entity is being evoked within the sanctuary or the temple or the microcosmic universe or the Temple of Solomon. Then now, if the individual is of one sexual preference, they'll switch sexual preferences. And this is why the ones who contact Elohim the most, which is, of course, the Catholic Church, and the individuals that are in there that understand these rights, those old men that are like 50, but they have this homosexual preference, it is because it changes you. That's what they called it, bath. Okay, which is, again, from yesterday, the root to Baphomet. The bath means you were dirty, but now you're clean, which is their whole propaganda. But to be clean, you have to change, which, of course, is Barack Obama's slogan. You get changed, like you're just basically $1. So now, you can see why also dollars, by the way, is a doll, okay? And the R is a pentagram. Okay, so it's saying a pentagram doll, which of course is what the Oscar is. And of course, the actual thing, by the way, for anyone who hasn't been tuning into this, is standing on a 5-spoke rim and is basically a sigil or a dollar. Okay, so, and an Oscar, of course, is a cross, which that cross is of Templar, which looks like a sword, but only if you turn it in its proper direction. Okay? Behold, I come with the sword. This is this quote-unquote Jesus. Okay? Another thing. Jesus comes from the root Jess. Okay? We'll keep this back here because that's the United States, I guess. What happens is Jess, G. You guessed it, yes. Okay, that's the word for yes. So when you say yes, yes, us is a pluralization, meaning that it only increases the word more. So the word is yes-us, yes-us. You see, so it's a complete submission. You're a yes man, basically, as they call it. You won't say no. Okay, you just turn the other cheek. So this is what you're dealing with. These are the games they like to play. This is a game to them now. You're a piece unless you choose to become whole. That's why I tell you, peace, peace, brother, peace. P-A-C-E. Get a little agitated here, sorry. Peace, meaning two. Like it's not the whole thing. You'll never get the whole thing asking for peace. You have to find peace. You'll never find peace. It's whole. Excuse me? It starts to get a little strange after a while. You realize you're being played. Then we get a chance to see what you're really about. Because most people that figure that out start expanding fast. I was lucid dreaming all this morning, I'm telling you. Like I said, that's why I only mentioned one quick time, but the alpha brain, them boys got it right. The more complexity of the detail that you conceive within your mind, within the dream, the more the mind responds as if it's actually understands how to build the construct of a dream world seconds before you can actually imagine what you want to see. This is basically like the other side of yourself that understands everything before it even happens. And that's why you need that extra access to that dream world in order to get rapid downloads about what is going on here. And those downloads at the same time come in experiences more than just words. Because of course, for you to go outside and try to have this experience and try to hang on with these entities in 3D and all that seems a little crazy. But in the dream world, because you're unlimited, you just need access. And this is, again, what I've been talking about is giving you access to the keys, to your body, your vehicle, not to controlling humans and all the other stuff. It's push you in the wrong direction like that. That's what they do. You can have so much power. Power so you control who? You can't control yourself, but you control other people's stuff. This is like you don't want to stay on your plate. You're already working on somebody else's plate. So let's get into this a little bit. Elohim and this connection of phi, because the real word is Alim. Okay? This comes back somehow as Elohim later. This is the corruptions. Everything evolves. Don't expect for language not to have the same situation. So what this sigil is about is it evokes the numbers in a cipher 3.1415 or 31415. Elohim. Meaning actually to completely circumference the circle, a soul. That's why it's the number that just keeps going on and on and on and on, an infinite number, okay? So the secrets lied within this number at many times. Just want to make sure I give you the complete equation here. Okay, so let me show you how this also connects into reality. Okay, with these number 3, 4, 5. Okay, which equal 12, by the way. Okay. Okay. Let's put that here. So 3 is the number of infinite spirit. Okay, so spirit. 4 is the number of infinite matter. So matter. 5 is the number of the combination between spirit and matter. And let me explain to you how that works, because some people are like, wait a minute, I thought 4 was matter. It's because 4 is 2. Okay? Because really in numbers there's only a 1, 2, 3. And hang on here, I'm not losing you here, but all other numbers are derivatives of this number, just like all numbers are derivatives of the number 1. But if you want to expand the system a little bit to 3, which is the most you can really go in this whole number system, A, B, C is as easy as 1, 2, 3. What happens is that 2 becomes 4, because 2 twice is 4. So what happens is because 2 again is basically the original symbol of matter coming into manifestation. Matter plus spirit equals 5, and this is why this symbol once again is combustion, because it's got 2. And if you want to look at this from a molecule level, it has one, let's say 1A principle here, or actually we'll call it 1 spirit principle here, and another spirit principle here, and then sometimes 1 matter, 2 matter, 3 matter, keeping it unbalanced, kind of continuing its war, because there's 3 matters now and only 2 spirits. So now there's this war until one of these either convert to being a spirit, and then the war ensues. And this is, of course, governing the direction the person is spinning, whether they're becoming this ultra evil or ultra light individual, that now after a while the ultra light, remember, this entire system is defunct. The ultra light individual starts thinking it's their duty to destroy and kill and purge and all these things that are never really thought out properly. When it's teaching, you can get the demon in front of you and teach the demon at times if it's the demons inside of an individual. It has to understand it from a different level. You don't teach somebody something by doing the same thing they're doing. You got to work on a higher level of systems. So, as you see here, there's this continuous confusion going on in this 5. Or what like I said, is the phi, the fighting, right? The 5, okay? So these are all the same words, and of course, this PH and the F is interchangeable. And this brings us to another entertaining thing about the NFL, which would be the NPHL, which would be the Nephil. You could put any vowels here because in Arabic and Hebrew, there's no vowels. So it's only these words, NFL or NPHL. Nephil are giants. And this is why they use the giants to run and play the game. In addition, you have, to get ready to round this up, we have on the dimension individuals who understand all of this. Like, I've revealed a decent amount today, something to fit in definitely what people already know. Something that will be very confusing if you don't know very much, but actually if you just look at the diagrams, it'll start to make a lot of sense. But now we must talk about, because this was also supposed to be the spiritual police group today, but I decided to just merge it into the etymology and ciphering group. We have to talk about, in the industry, let's take an individual such as Liar Cohen, who's responsible for signing individuals like Jay-Z, okay? Okay? Now, here what we have is priest. This is also Kabbalistically C-N-N later, okay? Because it's really Conan. And this is how I was explaining how when the language, especially if you don't speak this language, when it finally gets to people that don't speak the language, they don't even know what it means. So they don't know Cohen is Conan. And they don't know Conan is a Sumerian. They don't know that's the Sumerian sign of the Ilu. So when Conan becomes CNN to people, maybe they may get it. And then, like I said, this is he is Cain, which is the original CN. Okay? And of course, this means a priest, but also a king. Because king is Khan, is king, is coin, is Cohen. They make coins. That's why they deal with money. What happened was, just to explain this very briefly, is that inside the temple, the money changers became everything after a while. Like they started getting into every single facet of the people's life. The money changers in the temple who created the numbers started basically infesting everything. So now you have individuals that are Kabbalistically inclined, to use that word, Kabbalistically inclined. Let's see where this camera is. Yeah, this one's done. So you have these individuals that are Kabbalistically inclined that are designing individuals such as Jeezy and Jay-Z. And I'm not just going to start with rappers today, because you can see the same thing is going on here. So what does this name mean? And of course, the J in this language is known as the hook. This is why Jesus has a J in the front. Most people who are able to actually get another individual's attention have, on a deeper level, have the beginning of the name J. It's just one of those things in the language. Because that's what it does, it's J. So it hooks for a moment. So what happens is that you have words that begin with this. Now, of course, the J's opposite, or his shadow, is L. Okay? Everything about J, his opposite is L. J is curved, L is straight. Okay, and this is how it works. J faces left, L faces right. So this is how it works. So now what you have in the Kabbalah, and of course Z connects it. So this makes the name mean from J, which of course is the name of the God too, by the way, excuse me. God's name is J. His name is either Y, which became known as the nail, and the nail is needed, of course, to connect the cube. Okay, and then a nail. Boom. The Y. Okay, the Y, the I, me. It's all about me. God says, worship me. I'm the only God. Ah. You see how it all connects? So J, Y, I, and then G, which is, they love this. Okay, they love the G. That's why Masonry is a G there, because that's the first, that is the primordial principle of their God, is this symbol, which of course is also a 6. And then that's why this cube becomes a Merkaba, and then of course the external sun is a Merkaba, a generator. It has a masculine principle here and a feminine principle here, giving it both poles that are necessary in order to create this combustion system. So now this is why these individuals, Jay-Z, he calls himself what? Hova. Okay? Because the God's name is Yah. That's the masculine part of the God. Hova, the feminine part of the God. So Jay-Z has some feminine thing going on. And of course, people who are in the industry are already aware of that. So the Yehovah is the religion, which of course is YHVH. Jehovah is no other than another corruption of the explanation of the name. It is 26. It's in the U.S. It's, you know, it's the whole, it's getting to the whole world. You know, you got individuals such as Op, Ra. Op is a Egyptian deity, and you are familiar with Ra, starting Harpo, which is the character in her movie The Color Purple, which is a Phoenician color. And that's why, you know, the Phoenicians are black and white, by the way. So you have Harpo, and then you have Har and Po, which is Harpocrates, which is the Egyptian mysticism of the sun god. And then they bring in Barak, which she endorsed heavily and really got him in the game after they pulled him out of the time capsule. And that means lightning, because lightning is the thundering of the god Yah, lightning god of destruction and war. Ram-headed, snake-faced, snake fang, all sorts of stuff. Anything that can basically mean squaring the circle and poking the circle, because remember, what this J is for is also, when this L, actually, L is the tool. L is the tool. J is the shadow that it casts, okay, is a cleaver. Okay, and this is the symbol also known as a right angle. That's why everyone must be right. How could right mean balance if it's actually the designation of one side of your body? So actually, would need to be right and left. But to them, it's right angle, because a right angle is a cleaver, because their god also is Saturn, and he carries this tool known as a scythe, because this religion was passed amongst people in the place of Scythia. And of course, this is Saturn, who's the Grim Reaper, right? Grim, whose claws. The father of the United States, of course, is Santa, S-A-N-T-A, and of course, everyone knows Santa is the anagram for Satan. But basically, a being who is tanned with Sa. Now, when you bring this Z here, okay, we're still going. A Z, of course, is the shadow of 7. An S, okay? It actually is 7 too, because remember, a Z is 2 sevens, okay? So this casts its shadow, and then you get to the final part, which let me get some room here to write down. So you see it's a cable, so you have to be able to cycle through it and be like, oh, okay, so that's that and that's that. Okay, so yeah, once again, so you get this AS or AZ, AS, ZA, and this particular entity. All right, so let's go. So this is why in the English language, when you think that the English language is 26 characters, think again. Because if the G is the Y is the I is the J, that just cancels out 4 characters. So, you know, that means a lot. And of course, the S is a Z, that cancels that out too. And so when you boil it back down to the only original symbols, you'll get to a certain number. And that'll become the core number of the program to break the cube. So let's see. Let me make sure I went ahead and got, okay, so yeah, a couple individuals, because I'm not done. I always go in because what do I have to lose? Like, limitless. Seriously, I tell you guys, if you could grasp some of the stuff that's coming through, it's limitless for you, but you are the one that has to do it. Like, I can't, like, do it for you, because that creates the same whole Jesus thing again. And this is where the knowledge was corrupted, because I don't doubt that there's individuals that came to this world to actually help this world and expand this world. But you can imagine the moment that they leave, like they did Tesla, they don't let you know about those individuals at all. And they give the credit to someone else and let everyone benefit off of things that they think, like Benjamin Franklin started the light bulb and all sorts of crazy stuff. But here it is, Nick Cannon. I was watching him for a moment while I was in the gym. Every now and then I get a chance to glance at the TV, and I do it on silent so that I could just see what's really going on without the chatter. And I'm noticing they got Nick Cannon up there. And, you know, he's up there with, on this show called The Talk, okay? And then the host to the show is obviously a red-green resonator, okay? Which is basically, you know, the lady standing out there in the Statue of Liberty, what that embodies, which we won't get into today. But the Red Queen, of course, carries that as her symbol, and also as the numbers 7 as her symbol, 11 as her symbol, 13 as her symbol, 8 as her symbol. You see what happens here? You start to realize that this entity known as the Queen is not just a male, or a female. Inside of the palace in England, that lady that's there is an androgynous individual because of the level of knowledge and that they have taken in to themselves. And that's why some people say, well, you know, I don't understand why the world can be so masculine if it's ruled by basically a female. And it's because it's actually ruled by spiritual entities infused inside of a vessel, more so than it is being ruled by what the face that you see. Of course, they're going to use the most gentle, nice faces possible that makes sense to them if they can find it. So now Nick Cannon, of course, Nick is another name for Satan, Saint Nick, right? Just to show you that this is a birth name. So either there's something whispering to the person, as it says, Uda billahi minash shaitan rajim, meaning God protect me from the whispers of shaitan. From that particular scripture in the Quran, you can learn that most of these entities that are not physical and that don't have corporeal bodies, they can only whisper because they don't have a voice box. Thus, they can't speak into 3D. So they must whisper to man in what sounds like a frequency or ringing of the ear. And then that individual thinks it's their own idea, especially if they're ignorant to such things. And then they take that idea and then they do what it says. So generally with most women at times, especially if they're under the influence of the Christianity, especially when the child's being born, they will give the child what the angel tells the woman to give the child the name of. Because as everyone, they tell you, oh, everyone has an angel. No, everyone is an angel. You see how they always love to put it outside of you so that you call upon something else? And then this gets you to agreeing that there's other things outside of you. And then you set up basically a portal for three-dimensional projections that you manipulate on your own, but actually can run on their own. Meaning that many of these programs of how they're giving them to you, they unpack themselves. So if you say, I want to be Nick Cannon, and you just think he's a good dancer, then what happens is that you get the full embodiment of Nick, also known as Saint Nick, but Nick also is a name for Satan. Canon, which is the name for Cain, CNN, the King, Cain, Cohen thing that I mentioned earlier. So you see how they play this game, because it's almost like that episode of Star Wars when they found the holocron cube with all the individuals that were supposed to really be motivated to actually really change the world. And then they took these individuals and Kabbalistically configured them in the cube to be confused of who is their daddy. Meaning that who is really the one that is sitting in the absolute position? No more than just you, but is that not enough, seeing that you are everything? So here's another one, Will Smith. It states it as it is. You know, this is definitely a doppelganger that I got run around on the dimension, but he just Will Smith. This is Smith means Cain. That was his other name, because Cain, as he said, two ball Cain, or two balls and a cane. That's 007. Okay. Tubal Cain was a smith. He smithed, meaning he made weapons. That's why he said Tubal Cain taught them how to fashion and form weapons, when they're supposed to be telling on the angels. But the angels are man and woman. So Tubal Cain is fashioning these swords, or what I call the S word, because he's tapped into primordial energies that have a lot to do with the serpent forces that were still in conflict, also known as serpent. Okay, a pent is a pentagram, or the key to the word pentagram. Sir is a snake, as the word sir, sar, sor, as in sorcerer, seer, as in hello sir, meaning hello snake, and all these words mean. So you see, this is the kind of behavior going on the dimension that everyone is not aware of. And this is why it said that in the Matrix, most of the beings that live here are asleep, because they don't know this. So actually where they're tapped into is more of their instinctual nature rather than their reasoning. And the instinct of the individual is then governed by their biological organisms in which they're taking and eating. And this, of course, is the different kind of meats and the impure artificial stuff that makes artificial people. Basically reactionary, waiting for someone to tell you something before you go do something, more like a computer. Last guy, I had to get in there in the soccer a little bit. I thought about this guy yesterday because I was watching a program, just monitoring the program. Trust me, I only need to watch about, I guess, an hour worth of TV in the gym, just looking at it really briefly, and I catch so much of the programming. Like, for instance, by the way, I'm a little late, but they dropped a guy from space the other day. Many people saw this. Actually, it wouldn't be that way. It would be like this way, I guess. Actually, it was every way. But they dropped him all the way from here to Little Rock. I mean, not Little Rock. Yeah, I guess the Little Rock. Roswell, okay? So the Red Bull, because remember, Red Bull is doing all the sponsoring, grew wings, okay? The Red Bull gets wings because that is the Sumerian symbol, which is a bull with wings, meaning something so massive and so dense where it would be impossible for it to actually fly, gets an opportunity to fly. This is the message that they want to send across the dimension, that you can be extremely dense but still fly. You just need to become a more massive creature. And in order to do that, and then they got all of these things that'll basically hold you and pin you down here forever. Remember, in a wrestling match, right? For those who, I'm into the sports just a little bit, as I call it, the serpent ports. Remember, in English, the S is a snake, no matter how much you want to play around with it. So anyway, for those who think this is preposterous, just trust me. Maybe 2 or 3 lifetimes you'll see, maybe it wasn't. Hopefully they don't switch the code on you and then you don't know what's going on again, like a baby. So in wrestling, which the gods love to do, remember Jacob, who is also James, wrestles the angel, right? Jacob against the angel. Then Anu, Anu doesn't wrestle. Alalu, who's actually the entity they know as Allah, wrestles, I believe it's, was it Inky? No, I don't think it was Inky. Excuse me, I'll have to update my Sumerian program, but anyway, Alalu is wrestling one of the other superior gods, and I'm thinking, or wannabe superior gods. So what is this wrestling match really about? Of course, the conflict, the continuous conflict and combustion. But what happens when you're wrestling and then the other person loses? What are you supposed to do? Pin them. See, it's there. It's all there. Go pin them and then count to what? 3. And that's, of course, 3 times 3. This is the kind of magic that's being used, because on a third dimension, 3D, the third planet from the sun, everything must be done 3 times. Mind, body, and soul must make a commitment. And then, like magic, it happens. So the last thing here is that this guy, Lionel Messi, and this is how, again, these individuals are used, because they have huge star power, huge potential. All they got to do is wake up to this. Once they wake up to this, man, we got this some real on our hands. Like I'm telling you, like, it's massive. So you have this Lionel Messi guy. But of course, this word, Messia, okay, comes from, basically, it means Eve angel. It means a go-between man and God, okay? So this guy is named Lionel Messi. He's one of the greatest soccer players in the world, okay? And of course, the soccer ball, as many people are aware, is full of these, what is basically a microcosmic world. A microcosmic world. It's the 5 and the 6. As you see, with a soccer ball is configured with pentagons and hexagons, which equals the number 11, which is the mating number. 5 is flesh, 6 is spirit. So there has to be a mating to bring it into the dimension. Then this dual being, also called the human, actually it would be more like this in the center, but then the person is here, and of course each side of your body is an exact duplicate to the other side. This is pairing. Now, even a woman, when she's growing the baby, she has this line right down the center of her stomach that appears only when she gets pregnant, when the skin is stretched back enough for you to see that line. So this lets you know that there is some real stuff going on here about why we have this other dual character that we constantly fight with, different parts of our mind and all that. And it's because of the genetic makeup. But your mind supersedes this to a degree where it can actually realize that that is what's going on. If you come into the knowledge, and then it can make both these dual characters come into one strong whole being. So now you got this 5 and 6 with the soccer ball, of course. So what these gentlemen are doing most of the time is basically kicking around the world. Okay? That's the whole idea of soccer, just wasting time, kicking around the world. Not even developing it, not picking it up, but, oh, wait, let's kick the world into a net. Oh, cut it out. Let's kick it into the net. In basketball, same thing. Let's throw the world, which is the symbol of a ball, into a net. So we can all stay here forever and never get to the rest of the universe. It was interesting. I was listening to this one ancient being, and it said, actually, how it really began to occur is that by the time on Earth we got to the height of our knowledge, and we thought, especially within the cosmos, that we were like here on the timeline that was that long, that we were almost complete. And then something occurred where we realized that we were only here. And that eventually we would visit every single star that you see in the sky. And this would make up our experience. And then that was when we became more at ease with what was going on here on earth, because we knew that it was only going to be a matter of time before the expansion began. Meaning that if there's all this space to expand and then you feel under pressure, it's only a matter of time before you break out of it anyway. Meaning that all of what the religions have done, because they're doing it too, they're kicking everyone inside of the net. So all of these religions and all these factions have basically put themselves into a position where they need your help. And that's how I'll leave it here today. That if you try to sit down and explain to one of them, and I'm going to tell you from the state of where my mind used to be when I was one, everything that you're saying is a lie. Meaning that sometimes, especially when there's an extreme level of other parties speaking in the other person's mind, Christianity and these religions, the person is not even tapped into their mind anymore. The moment you say something to them, many people experience this with heavily religious people. You say, look, did you understand that Yahweh means, no, that's the devil's talk. I don't need to know God. He's always going to be always. And then they start talking all this babble. Because remember, they can't prove anything that's being taught to them. And this doesn't strengthen them. It serves to weaken them, because that means they don't actually know what it is that they're doing at all. So this is like you mindlessly carrying out a role. How long in multiple lifetimes does that have to really occur before you realize, you know what? I'm more. I'm everything. I should not just be against just even the church across the street or just the other Muslims over there, and then they're doing the same thing. Can you pull back off of it for a minute and peep the game? So that looks like everything here. We got everyone included, and everything that I meant to translate today was done. I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to answer some questions, because that's something I wanted to get incorporated into our conversations, and that way our conversations can be directly specific to things that people need to know. I also want to let everyone know that I'm working on a piece of equipment that allows me to channel the audio from the computer, which would be Skype, into this device, which only really has one audio input, primarily HDMI. So I'm going to have to get something like a production switcher, which is really pricey, to be able to do that. So I just want to let people know that that is what's going on with why we're not running this directly into the Skype calls. But from this point, what I would like to do, at least before we can get that switcher, is I would like to get people to call in through Skype, and I can actually answer their questions there in real time, especially about anything that was discussed this week. Things that we've talked about on the show last week, so whatever questions you have, I can get those questions answered now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just open the line and ask Regina, just so that she can let me know, and that way I just don't leave the call without at least getting someone's questions, because I did tell her we were going to do this today. So I'm joining in on the call. There may be just a little interruption with the video because we've opened up the line, but wholeness. And Regina, was there any questions that you were able to pick up? Okay, I think Regina may be surfing for her mute button, or it may be a situation on my end with the audio.
Yes, I was searching for the mute button.
Okay, awesome. Wholeness.
Two questions. How can we use, not that one, because you might not have time to answer to. Do you have a suggestion for the method we can use for self-evaluation for our intent and the more sneaky things that we're unaware of ourselves? And what do people like us use?
Well, I mean, good question. I would just say, really, especially in light of today's call, to possibly play the call over again in regards to where these energies really come from, and us to understand the place that it needs to be put in. Somehow we can become so involved in the quote unquote the game, and involved in what we want in our priorities, we're not even realizing what we've already been given. And that's why they said that the more advanced beings never stop giving. That's really what puts them onto that state. So what happens is that if the individual has developed inside of themselves this this recluseness where they feel like that they're in a net and that they can't expand. What I would say is especially for the basic principles of how to clean the body, because there's a brute force way to really go at this. You have to understand that when you're dealing in 3D with the physical vehicle, then if the filters on the physical vehicle, which correspond even to the planetary and ethereal spheres, are dirty, then they must be clean. So there's not really one individual that I've ever talked to that went through a cleanse but still didn't change. And it's because a lot of the strata, as I call it, which is the actual, the past, builds up within the intestinal walls. There is, as they always talk about, as above, so below, and they're acting like they're enlightening you on something. The real truth to that is that inside of your body would contain all of the negative energies in even a physical form. So how can you get rid of those energies? And that's what we talk about with astral hygiene, which is, you know, making sure that you actually take time and attention out in removing bad bacteria, viruses, infections, and fecal matter, and many of the mucoid plaque and these things from the body, because that's what is actually changing the frequency. And also there was another, as I said, the moon is under investigation. I also have now discovered that the moon is more of an unnatural fertilization, meaning that it stimulates the fertile methods beyond their natural states. That's why many of the worms and things during the times where the moon is becoming full, many of those worms begin to multiply to a degree where it's basically damaging the body. So what we have to realize is also how this will manifest as far as urges, which means fire. The fires and the passions within is that basically during the full moon, you'll find like this werewolf, if you're extremely fleshly type person, that wants to get out and burn up all the energy. Graduating successive cycles of not doing that also is a major expansion level. Remember, what you're actually in is a module that will react still based on what you do, meaning that you really don't have to worry about per se if someone's watching you. I'm telling you how the universe really works is that once you do something, it responds to what you do. It's on a system like that, especially this immediate world. So when you overcome things every month and you allow your energies to be what is the word I'm looking for? When you allow your energies to basically channel properly, what happens is that you're able to, that energy is actually a seed. And so you see the results of that, seed and seed are the same word, you see the results of that in the next harvest. So basically, if you don't get all your energy burned up as you're going through the cyclic phase that you normally go through your energy all the time, unless you understand how to speed it up, then when it's time for there to be the delivery of that particular energy, you can now receive that rather than being cold, which is also where the coal comes in the back of the word circle. Now, Sir means snake, so Sir Coal is the name of the serpent itself. Now, again, this gets more into the actual amphibious / reptilian nature of the entity that we are calling Earth and what it really is, but you know, that's another conversation. So hopefully people can just understand that, especially if you've tried some of the ethereal products and you can't seem to get a result, common sense will tell you go brute force, but don't try to think through high levels of knowledge in a low state of consciousness, because it's not going to make sense. So thus the only thing that you're going to do, and I want people to understand this is also how people can have powers of predicting things, but those predictions could be negative all the time. And it's because each level of your body has an eye. And I'll just explain it like this. So of course there's supposed to be an eye here. Okay, and there's an eye here, and there's an eye here, and then there's an eye here, and many of these areas even look like eyes. Okay, and then even of course the penis or the vagina is an eye itself. It has an orifice. So what happens is that when you and let me just mute this line really quick. What happens is that when you then have activated a certain part of your body, and remember it's from the ground up. Or sometimes, as the new teachings are teaching from the top down, which has always been known to be very dangerous for the person because they can lose their mind. This is what really creates a fanatic, is that the energy comes through here, the person then sees out of their third eye, and then they see the hyperdimensionality. But if they have no ground, this serves to make them crazy because they actually have no anchors or roots here in earth, which is the reality. And because they're going to remain on the reality, even if they're having this crown chakra experience, then oftentimes these people choose to, like it's something that happens to the brain. It basically draws up and remains in this area while the body is still here on earth. And it just appears that the person is crazy. So remember, you have to activate all centers in balance if they're to be of any service to you. To activate one of the centers is going to cause a challenge, and that's why what happens, that's why what they talk about what happens in the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas, that each of the chakra has a lord of that chakra, and when you open that chakra, then you must face that lord. Sometimes your challenge is to fight, but not all the time. Sometimes your challenge is to love. So they talk about how each of these chakras basically oscillate back and forth between two different principles to make sure that you haven't gotten so much into one that you forget the other. And this, of course, is the perpetual swing of the chakra system. So we're talking about being fully conscious of every single breath like a dolphin every day, and then understanding exactly what moves you're making. So to finish explaining this, again, for those who may have dismal thoughts and ideas about what's going to happen in the reality in the future, etc. Because remember, Earth has always gone through cycles where Earth has never gone through a cycle where it's been completely destroyed. You need to get that in your mind first, because if it had been, then it would not be here. Duh. So the next thing is to understand that Earth is so large that certain areas go through cataclysms, like what Japan just recently went through, while other areas seem to still be like 5-star resorts in many essences. So what I'm telling you is the Earth actually balances its energies also, so that different areas come under problems while other areas are completely safe. So that's what you're really looking at. So to make sure that you remain always in the safe zone, because you're checking your system every day, making a sober estimate of yourself, then you need to make sure that you're not thinking from these lower chakra regions. And because you only have root chakra and down activated because you've been playing around in the underworld with the Egyptian deities all day, then what happens is when you see from your knee, that's how you're seeing things. So like they say, a midget standing on a giant's shoulder can see much further than a giant. The riddle with that is that if you're seeing where the midget is seeing, then you're only seeing a certain part of the reality. The midget is, of course, a small man or a small woman. So basically, if you're seeing from the level of a small being in your mind, then that is all you have access to. So this person is seeing basically the past or the end or destruction. And so they come with prophecies like later on, and they're talking about 2012's version, 5 parsecs ago, it's going to be destruction and chaos, because that's where they're seeing from. Likewise, most of the individuals that you talk to that talk from here or even outside of here, they're always talking spaceships. And of course, they need to land too. Remember, all those people who are having this huge spaceship fascination, it's become just like the Jesus for them. Basically, anything can become the Jesus scenario or the yes scenario if you don't watch it. It could be the TV shows. It could be, excuse me, I want to talk about more direct things like ayahuasca. It could be, of course, Jesus. It could be Allah. It's a way of being of where anything becomes to the point where it starts to really control everything that you are. This is what you have to really be careful of. And so hopefully, Regina, again, so everyone's clear on that, you must see the full spectrum. So to finish explaining this, I'm sorry. The lights are all shining out. They must then be made into one point. This makes them now, as you see when light is shined into the prism, it splits out into 7 colors. So you're basically already the light shine through the prism. We already explained that 2 shows ago, with you being the absolute, but now you're this human being. So you've been sent through the prism or into the triangle. And now you've come out as 7 colors, 7 days a week, etc. And now what you must do is you must collapse the chakras, which is what Dynamo Jack says. This area here, in this area here is where the energies must be made to meet. They must be now, they say, meet me in the center. And so someone is on the high level of consciousness, another person on the low level of consciousness, they won't go to where each other is. And that's how your energies work in the body. They must be made to meet in the center, which of course has a lot to do with what you eat also, because that's why the stomach is here. So what happens is that as these energies begin to coalesce, then they form one eye, where you're now seeing through one eye rather than all these divided eyes. And then your whole body lights up. So some people say, oh, that eye is in the crown chakra. Some say that eye is in the stomach. It's to my understanding that the navel is the center of the body. So that's, and of course, seeing Dynamo Jack's clear show of real pranic force beyond question. You just listen to him. That's why there's still people that are here on the planet or have done something that show us the basic principles of everything. We just want to expect more and more and more until we eventually get confused. But the reality is in this area, the two energies, the two forces must be compressed. They must be made to wed. They must be made to dance. And the only way that happens in your mind is if you stop seeing these positive forces, these negative forces, and you start getting to work. Meaning that examination of it does not actually mean accomplishment. Meaning that once you've figured it out, it still takes action. So, Regina, any more questions?
Martin was asking, why is G equals 6?
Because
He said it's the seventh letter. Why is that so?
Because every letter, like we talked about, one, okay, so one is basically the letter, okay, or the number. When you get 2, okay, it's a byproduct of 1. So when you get 3, it's a byproduct of 3. So this is what relates these two numbers. So when you talk about G, now by the way, English language is not in a 1, 2, 3, 4 order, by the way. So everyone should know that English language is in a tumbling cipher, which actually is a route through the cosmos of the words. Because remember, all the words have cosmic correspondences. This is originally known as the language of the Malachim. And I'll just put that here, which means king. Malachim, I believe. Okay, which is basically MLK, Martin Luther King, which is basically Moloch, which means king. Okay, so what you're dealing with here is with the number 6 and 7 is that, of course, 7 is the birth of the number 6. This is how 7 gets here, is 6, while 8, of course, gets here because of 7. So this is why in the old days there's another term, and someone actually told me about exactly what that term really means. But from this diagram alone, you should see that the 6s and the 7s connect, because that's how it is with every number that is previous, that there's a relationship between the two. Like the number 7 and 8 is the number of what they say the number of the Great Mother, which is 13 times 6, which is 78. Now, of course, you see the 6 and you have the number 13. This is, of course, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm writing this in the thing here. Okay. So this number 7 and 8, and the birth of this number gives us 13 times 6, which is supposed to be the number of the Great Mother, and then it gives us 78. So again, trying to understand the language of numbers is to first follow the principles of the numbers and what they really stand for, because remember, the numbers are not numbers in the sense of how you see them. It's actually a language. So hopefully that clarifies how a 6 is a G. Now, here's another thing. This is a symbol, like a G is a symbol of a certain procession. So if you kept going with the G, it would eventually be like this, okay? And that's why this letter P, okay, is a 6 also, but upside down. So if you flip the 6 or the P, then you get a 6. But as I was saying before, the papacy, which goes under the sign of the Chi rho, also control the number 6. Now 6 for you to understand, why I mean that these letters are basically archetypical languages, is that 6 is sex. Okay, now remember, this is just SX, not a Nissan either. So SX means generation, because this, of course, is a snake, and this is the symbol for Earth. Remember, Earth's symbol is this, 4 gates to Earth. So what this means is a serpent inside of Earth, basically. And so that equals regeneration, also known as sex or 6. So this becomes known as the sexagram. And then as you see, all these angles are like this, which are 7s. That's why it's important for them to idolize the number 7, because it connects these angles. While in another language, or in another code or program, the A and the shape of the A becomes important. And as you know, that the A is actually the square and the compass itself. Actually, excuse me, it's more like that. And of course, you get that, and that's called your protractor. And so all of these symbols were actually tools. So realistically, I guess what you can kind of see with this is that even if at a certain beginning of time, let's say not the advanced beginning of time, but the more primordial beginning of time, even things that were shaped like this became the tools that were needed to actually begin to map Earth. Because remember, Earth is also a circle. So you can see why also there was an innocent intent with this knowledge, by the way, for many of the men. And that's also why many good men are attracted into learning this knowledge, because they think, oh my goodness, I'm going to learn where I am. And then all of a sudden they start sneaking up on them with all of the rest of the darker side of the circle, or the shadow world. And then that takes the man from his light side or his solar side to his more lunar phase. So remember, this is also a symbol of Earth. So if you're a human being and you're here and you don't know where you are, you need these kind of tools which are built in your senses more so than any type of physical tool. But you need these tools in order to be able to navigate Earth, unless you plan on staying in one place. Now, this is, of course, what happens with us in the universal consciousness, which is that when we go to sleep, we don't just stay in the bed. We all of a sudden take our RAN, as it's called, is then used to go into other spheres and other hyperdimensional selves in order to be able to remain moving. And that's why I was also saying that the sun, it doesn't sleep. So obviously, because it's on the other side of the world when you don't get it. So the sun is, of course, Latin for soul, and it's the same word as the soul. And so because the soul doesn't sleep, then you're actually, when you go to your physical body goes to sleep, the soul is wandering into other places and other regions. Okay, so let me unmute my line here again. And Regina, is there any more questions?
Yes, we have a question. Keishan wants to know, what is the etymology of the name Emily or Lamora? How can we be able to discern words and names? How and what can we get out of the net?
Okay. Well, first, to cipher those names, I do need to take a look at them for a minute. I personally has now stopped ciphering names on the queue for people, because it takes, when you tell someone this is what this means, and you need to have taken a lot of time to really be able to explain that. So I won't choose to cipher those names on live today. Actually, I do see those names here. Actually, why don't we do this? Emily, I won't handle now, because I need to look at it further, because I can't look at it at a glance and say, oh, that's exactly what it means. But as far as La Moria, which is a name that's asking to be ciphered, it basically means the death, is what this name would mean. It means the blackness, because Mor, as everyone knows, means blackness, and Aya only feminizes it. And it feminizes it because, of course, the god of the sea is known as Aya, but the god of the sea was not a male. If anything, it was a male and a female, which is when the A and the E get together. This is also spelled A-Y-A. This meant, actually, when you really look at it, it means the double blackness. So again, you're talking about primordial energies more than likely used to create things, key components used to create things. And then, of course, with La is actually another name for a god, but the female side of the god, which is where you get the term Ella, which is, of course, where Rihanna's running around screaming, but that's what you get, the feminine side of more than likely Saturn. That's the other thing. As we continue to expound on this more and go on this great astral quest together, you know, we're still at the state of now, I think we've jumped a major hoop today in our understanding, because now we realize that numbers are actually a language. And as you trace it back more, what you get is information like Aya, who's Saturn, Sat, who of course is Saturn, and many of the words that are used for this particular entity, which is of course a planet, the Lord of the Ring as it's called, was the one who is responsible for wisdom also. So, and then of course the ancient people seem to exclaim that they figured out that Set was going to be the one giving them the information that they needed about afterlife. This is what the Egyptians had determined. So I guess for a while, people began to see that the daylight was what was already known and discovered. And then the darkness was the area where things hadn't been discovered, so that area appeared to be more limitless to them. Of course, anytime you put corruption into this kind of system that's so potent, meaning when you're going to look for something that doesn't exist, the entire intent of your mind, as they showed in many scientific experiments, determines what you find. Meaning that because you're not really supposed to be looking anywhere for something that is already everything, if you decide to go and try to find it, the only thing that you can really do, especially with strong intent, is bring it into three dimension, and which is of course called creation. And so whatever you create and bring into 3D, then that becomes your child. So what happened is with many of these individuals embarking on the knowledge, looking into the abyss, because of their intent to rule and over their brethren and sisters and to become dominant, what they end up bringing out was that character from themselves. And it began to intensify. And this is why you got times of slave gods who were making the earth extremely unbalanced, because all of maybe 100,000 men's work was in one person's hands. And that person thus became like a heavy weight, even like a pyramid, physical pyramid, organic pyramid, the heavy weight to the earth, throwing the earth off balance. So remember, if there's too many individuals that are holding up or too little individuals that have all the resources, then there becomes an unbalanced level. And this also shows in the physical reality, once again, where you get two very powerful individuals that cannot really share the same space at times without coming into some level of conflict with each other. So you get another parallel of how that really works out in the physical reality. Is there anything else, Regina?
I think that's good. There was one more question, but I guess I could put that on the site.
Okay, and I guess I will finish that question. How and what can we get out of the net? Now, I'm trying to really understand the question directly. If it's how do we get out of the net? Again, earlier in today's conversation, and really within the last 3 conversations, there's been the consistent instructions about how to raise the vibratory frequency to shake out of the net. Meaning that the wiggle is either through the net or to break the net. So your vibratory frequency is a womb. Net is actually also an Egyptian word. So as in netter, by the way, or the Neteru. Also, I really want to let people know that all today, don't take any of what I've told you as me demonizing anything or saying that it's wrong or right. I'm just only taking you on the Astral Quest. You know, when you choose to get off and on, it's up to you. But the net were the different entities that were used. Actually, this is more like the Neteru. Neteru. Uru means fire, meaning that they contain souls. So this is like the womb fire, which actually is the symbol of the pentagram for these people. Like, and that's why in the pyramids, if you see the pyramids from the top, they look like this, and they count the points like this. You see, like, and that's why they say the knowledge of Phi is encoded within the pyramids, because it is, but you know, you have to understand your mathematics. And so the Neteru, or basically the spectacles that were used in order to cast the shadow of the physical bodies, are the nets. In order to get out of the net would be basically asking yourself, how do I get out of the womb? So then as a child, if you can notice the process with a woman, because the same process that you see the child going through from the time of its inception to its conception, then you understand how you got here in this world and also how to leave. In the event that you feel that you've gotten too big for the matrix, the only thing that's necessary is for you to actually graduate, meaning gaining all the proper nutrients that are needed for you to be completely adept or adult, and then make yourself basically go into the labors of leaving the dimension. And so you'll emancipate from the womb when you're ready. And when the lesson of this entire planet, which is really redundant, by the way, it's not very difficult to understand, but when the lesson of this planet has fully been gathered by you, then you will already inherit a perpetual energy that will make you the size of at least this planet. Thus in that state, you would really need to say to Mom, you know, I'll be connected to you always. Now I'm going to be a planet because I've always been one, hyperdimensional self. So that's what we're talking about. And so that's going to be it for today's call, just so we're able to get this up so people can start to enjoy that live stream, and that way, I'm not sure if my live broadcast may have stopped here, but I'm going to go ahead and, again, take it down for today just for a moment, so that way we can get this thing up for everyone. Hopefully the recording came through okay. I'll be checking out that recording in the end. I wanted to say wholeness and balance vibration to everyone. Thank you for being present. Information has been really awesome today. The flow is phenomenal with the groups, and so we will continue. Wholeness. This is the board today, and before I get into the board though, now that we know that it's set up properly, now you're just going to get in like my head here. But before we get into the board today, I really wanted to talk about some stuff in regards to etymology and ciphering in the Kabbalah and how the Kabbalah came about. And so we're going to do a little story reading time again, and just so that you're aware, you know, where the origins of a lot of the modern interpretations of letters and numbers really come from, and also to understand that letters were never connected to numbers in the beginning. This is a major thing that you have to understand, that for the ancient people, counting, and it just all depends on which group of ancient people you're referring to. But if you're referring to the indigenous ancient people, of course, their counting was done through sticks, and they still have in many places where they still use a stick counting system. So for them, it was just simply checking off, making the straight line as the indicator of 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can imagine that because numbers is not just a stick, and let's utilize the board here. Because the number, so the indigenous would do this and then sometimes this, like the old school method, to count things. And when it came to language and letters and numbers, it was never written down. So then there graduated a system where people were actually just writing the letters, let's say, or writing something as a letter. And then there became entire languages. And of course, Arabic was, or the roots of Arabic and Sanskrit, and of course, Tamil were the roots to a lot of language systems. But still, those language systems never found themselves attached to numbers. And there's a reason why, until much later. Because, of course, let's say, for instance, this is an A, okay? It didn't ever become one until way later on, because this language of numbers was introduced way later on. So this is something that you need to really be aware of. I'm going to try to write bigger here. So the language of numbers, this what we call, 1, 2, 3, 4, these particular symbols are a language within themselves. So in an instance, we really shouldn't look at these numbers at times as just numbers, for better lack of words. It's actually a language. And for the beings who know how to read that language, or choose to read or learn in that language, sometimes numbers, okay, can be numbing. Meaning that there becomes an extreme level of having no feeling when you start using the language of numbers. And this is how it manifests in society, as everyone's just a number now. They give you a social security number, then you have a driver's license number, and then a tax ID number, and then an EIN number. So you have all these numbers because to the system that's actually reading you, which is really a computer, it speaks numbers. So now, this is, of course, a very deep revelation for everyone. Let's get into, again, how the numbers came about, like the language of numbers came about. And as I said before, Pythagoras was the key figure in pushing forth this new language called numbers. And what he would do is him and the team and the retinue he was with, the cult that he was with, would go into areas and start attaching the people how to what later on became known as not just squaring the circle, but triangulating the circle at times and hexing the circle at times. And this is why. Let me make sure. This is why. Some people are familiar with this term squaring the circle, but the square is not the only tool used to corner the circle. And this is why. Now, in an instance, if we were trying to describe the limitless into this reality, we would have to use this symbol. This is a symbol in itself that should never really be used in the physical reality. It should always really be kept high and holy, for a better lack of words. That's why the word holy, right? You could spell it like this. You could spell it like this. The holy, right? You're never supposed to really put the holy, especially the holiest of holies, inside of the dimension, okay? And that's why inside of this dimension is the holiest of holies. And then, of course, this is that phi base thing going on, okay? But the actual temple, which later on became known as the Temple of Solomon, was to create these phi base systems inside of an actual building for ultimate charging in the holies of holies, which was known as the Black Cube or the Kaaba. Okay? So, holy, if you were to mention it here as a symbol, you would have to use this one. So, now, of course, with the misunderstanding of this one, people have this idea that when they throw something away, it goes nowhere. Because it goes in a hole and it never comes back again. That's not true. When you throw something away, it goes to the garbage dump. So this is why the limitless should always remain outside of the limited. Just remember that. So now, with the holy, what happens is you have several different organizations that were looking to square, triangulate, or whatever you can really imagine with the circle or with the unlimited spirits, okay? And we have about, I guess, 7 here now, so we can go with it. So if one chooses to utilize the type of knowledge that would divide the circle, meaning make the soul divided, okay? They would use this knowledge. This is the knowledge of how to divide the circle one time, okay? This is the knowledge of yin and yang, okay? And then when the circle is then divided twice, it becomes this or this. Okay, now remember, all of these are belief systems, and the reason why I use this one in the middle is because it's like the Mercedes-Benz sign, right? It's just 3, but that means 3 triangles or 3 suns. As we know, the ones who deal with this system are worshiping 3 suns known as Sol, and An. Okay, now the next level of this level of division is then this one, okay? And everyone's seen that symbol before. And the next level of dividing the circle is this one, okay? That's 5 sides. The next one is this one. That's 6 sides. The next one is this one. That's 7 sides. People's language to numbers, like if they found anything written, they would say, okay, now this aleph means 1 and beth means 2. So this is how more or less a race of people put another GUI or a GUI over the top of other people's language so that they could just read their languages like numbers to find out the hidden number, okay? The unknown quotient, as they call it. People don't ever really think about all this stuff, like how does it happen? And some of the individuals involved, and Crowley and the Queen and all these different individuals, like what are they really up to? Because obviously they're not into a heavy level of producing expansive universes and planetary systems, because they choose not to educate and activate their supposedly children. And so this is why, you know, we have to see how the system has been basically put on a computer type autopilot, where something that knows how to predict how predictable people are going to act is running things. And it also shows you how to guide yourself into an absolutely organic sphere. So here's what you're dealing with. You have Paracelsus, because I remember I said Pythagoras and those guys that were spreading the numbers as a language. You have Paracelsus, you have Cardinal Nicholas Casnus, you have Jacob Boehm, you have other cardinals, Pope Sixtus. You have Rudolph and Cutworth and Sir Isaac Newton. You have Francis Bacon, of course. And, you know, there's a whole list of others. John Dee, who's the original 007. You have many individuals, and I'm even going to show you in the current times how this keeps going, that are now moving throughout the world attempting to make all cultures submit to numbers. Now, remember, the numbers also come in with money very heavy, so you can see that there was more in their bag of tricks than just this language of numbers.